A storm had been stalking the city since dusk. Not the theatrical kind with lightning splitting the heavens and thunder crashing on cue. This storm was quieter than that, meaner. It pressed itself against the windows in long, wet sighs, rattled the fire escape with skeletal fingers, and soaked the streets below in a black shine that turned every reflection into something uncertain. By midnight, the whole city looked drowned. Jaleo liked nights like this, or at least he used to. There had been a time when storms felt cinematic, like a private performance, back when rain against the glass meant coffee, old records, and the luxury of being alone with his thoughts. That was before Owen vanished. Now storms made the apartment feel too small. They made shadows longer, memories louder. They made the silence in his brother's absence feel less like grief and more like something unfinished. Jaleo stood in the center of his apartment, watching rain snake down the window pane in silver veins. The room around him was dim except for the warm amber pool cast by 3 candles burning low on the kitchen table. Their flames bent and trembled each time the wind worried at the old building. Dust clung to the corners. The radiator hissed like something whispering to itself. Somewhere overhead, pipes knocked in the walls with the hollow rhythm of bones. The board waited on the table, round, velvet black, painted with rings of letters, numbers, months, zodiac signs, and pale star-stitched constellations that seemed to shift if he looked too long. At its center, a geometric sigil bloomed, sharp and symmetrical, like the iris of some patient cosmic eye, and resting over it, suspended from a silver chain in Jaleo's hand, was the pendulum. A small amethyst point, faceted, cool, violet as a bruise, still as a held breath. He had bought it that morning from a shop he could have sworn had never been there before. No sign above the door, just black painted glass and a brass bell that gave a low, tired chime when he stepped inside. The place smelled like dust, cedar, and rainwater. Shelves leaned under the weight of strange little things. Tarnished rings, wax-sealed jars, stacks of cards tied in ribbon, candles black as oil, bowls of dried flowers he couldn't name. Everything inside the shop looked old enough to remember someone else's secrets. The woman behind the counter had looked older than the room. Not frail, not soft. Ancient in the way stone is ancient. Her silver hair was braided down her back. Her hands were all vein and bone, adorned with rings that flashed when she wrapped the pendulum in black tissue. She never asked what he wanted. She only looked at him once, long enough for something in Jaleo's spine to tighten. Then she said, in a voice like paper dragged over wood, "Don't ask who is there." Her fingers pressed the wrapped pendulum into his palm. "Ask what it wants." That should have been enough to make him leave. Instead, it was exactly why he bought it. Now, hours later, standing in the amber hush of his apartment, with rain tapping its patient fingers against the glass, Jaleo found himself thinking of the way she'd said it, not like advice, like warning. He rolled his shoulders, trying to shrug off the feeling. "This is stupid," he muttered to the empty room, though the sound of his own voice came back strangely thin. The candles guttered. Jaleo sat. The chair gave a low creak beneath him as he pulled it close to the table. He rested his elbow near the edge, steadying his wrist the way he'd seen in tutorials he half-watched and barely believed. The silver chain slid cool through his fingers. The amethyst point dangled over the center of the board, perfectly still. Outside, rain hissed against the city. Inside, the room seemed to lean in. Jaleo exhaled through his nose and gave a humorless smile. "All right," he said softly, half to the room, half to himself. "Let's see what all the fuss is about." He lowered the pendulum until it hovered over the center sigil. The chain swayed once, settled. His reflection stared back at him, in the darkened window behind the table. Pale, tired, a face worn thinner by 3 years of not knowing. He looked away from it. Then, with the faint embarrassment of someone speaking into a silence he did not expect to answer, he asked, "Is anyone with me?" Nothing, of course nothing. The pendulum hung motionless over the center of the board, Jaleo let out a quiet breath and almost laughed. Then the crystal twitched, a tiny movement, so slight he almost dismissed it. Then again, left, right, once, twice. The motion grew steadier, wider, a measured arc. Then, with a sharpness that made his pulse trip, the pendulum swung hard toward yes. It struck the edge of the marked space with a dry little click. Jaleo went still. A laugh escaped him anyway, brittle and breathless. "Fine," he said, though the word felt oddly difficult in his mouth. "Cute." The chain trembled between his fingers. He swallowed. "What's your name?" The pendulum jerked inward so suddenly, the silver chain snapped taut against his knuckles. It circled the center once, twice, then drifted toward the ring of letters, slowly, deliberately. It stopped above Jaleo's brow lifted. "D," he murmured, dramatic. The pendulum moved again, across the board, to O. A smile tugged, reflexive and thin. Subtle. Then again, to N. The room seemed quieter now, not silent, quieter, as though every small sound had retreated to make room for something else. The radiator stopped hissing. The pipes overhead fell still. Even the rain seemed to soften against the glass. The pendulum shifted one last time. To T, Jaleo's smile disappeared. D-O-N-T, don't. The air in the room changed, not colder, thinner, as if the apartment itself had inhaled and forgotten how to exhale. Jaleo's grip tightened around the chain until the links bit into his fingers. His voice came quieter now. "Don't what?" The response was instant. The pendulum spun so violently, the chain twisted around itself with a metallic hiss, winding around his knuckles. Like a living thing before snapping outward across the board with enough force to sting his hand. It flew past the letters, past the numbers, and landed over a single word on the outer ring. August. Jaleo stopped breathing. For a moment, the world narrowed to that one word, painted in yellow-green script beneath the candlelight. August. His mouth went dry. 3 years ago, Owen disappeared in August. No note, no goodbye, no body. Just a dead phone found in the passenger seat of his car, abandoned near the river, with the driver's door left open and the keys still in the ignition. The police called it suspicious, then tragic, then cold. The case thinned into paperwork, then silence. Friends stopped calling. Search parties stopped searching. Even grief, eventually, had the indecency to grow quiet, but not Jaleo's. Jaleo stared at the pendulum hanging over August and felt something old and buried uncoil in his chest. "No," he whispered. The crystal swayed, slow, patient, like something listening. His throat tightened. "Is this about Owen?" The pendulum lunged toward yes, so violently it struck the board with a crack sharp enough to make one of the candle flames shudder. Jaleo recoiled. His pulse turned feral. That name had never been spoken in this room. Not tonight, not aloud. No one knew he'd been thinking it. No one. A low roll of thunder passed somewhere overhead, though beyond the windows the sky remained unnervingly dark and blank. Jaleo's mouth had gone dry enough to ache. He forced the next question out. "Is he dead?" The pendulum moved, but not toward yes, not toward no. It drifted, slow as a funeral procession, toward unknown. Jaleo felt his stomach drop clean through him. Unknown, not dead, not alive. Something worse than either. The candle flames bent inward. He barely noticed. His fingers had started to shake. "Where is he?" This time, the pendulum moved at once. No hesitation. It cut across the board in fast, decisive swings, striking letters with an unnerving certainty that made Jaleo's skin pebble. W-A-T-E-R. His breath caught in his throat. Water. Of course. The river. That was where they found the car. That was where every search had ended. And yet the word hit him wrong. Too easy. Too obvious. Like bait. Jaleo leaned closer, pulse hammering in his ears. "What water?" The pendulum circled the center once, twice, faster now. The candles flickered violently. Their flames bent inward toward the board, as though drawn by breath. Then the pendulum snapped to the number ring. A pause. Then one. Jaleo stared. The pendulum drifted higher, to the months. It settled over October. A pulse of cold slid down his spine. October 31st, tomorrow. Halloween. The room suddenly felt much smaller. The chain trembled in his hand. What happens tomorrow? The pendulum stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. Dead still above the board. The silence that followed was monstrous. No pipes, no radiator, no rain, no city, nothing. Then very slowly, impossibly, the crystal rose. Jaleo's breath caught so hard it hurt, not swung. Rose. 1 inch above the board, suspended, weightless. The silver chain lifted with it, drawn taut by nothing Jaleo could name. Every muscle in his body locked. The pendulum hung there, hovering in defiance of gravity, of reason, of every explanation his mind tried and failed. Then it dropped. Hard, it slammed against the letters with frantic, violent force. DONTLETHIMIN. Jaleo read it once, then again. His blood turned to ice. Don't let him in. 3 sharp knocks split the dark. Jaleo jerked so hard, the chair screamed across the floor. The sound came again. Knock, 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 not loud, not frantic, measured, patient. From the front door, the candle flames went out all at once. Darkness swallowed the room. Not dimness, not shadow. Darkness, thick and absolute. Jaleo sat frozen in it, one hand clenched around the silver chain, the other gripping the edge of the table hard enough to ache. The smell of extinguished wax curled into the air. At the far end of the apartment, the knocking came again. 3 times. Slow. Certain. The pendulum began to move on its own, swinging in the dark. Forward, back, forward, back. Then, with dreadful certainty, it turned and pointed toward the door.